My name is Medea Benjamin. I'm the founding director of Global Exchange. And Global Exchange is kind of a hybrid organization. We do lots of different things, but one of the overarching themes of Global Exchange is how to make U.S. policy more accountable to people in the United States and the planet in general, and how to make U.S. corporations more accountable to the environment and the workers and the communities that they're in. I believe in always going to the scene of the crime, and in this case, Vandenberg is the scene of the crime. I've also spent my life trying to get more resources to starving people around the world. And when I learned that we were going to be testing a missile defense system that could potentially be costing us anywhere from $60 billion up to over $200 billion, and that each test was about $100 million, I felt that I had to be there just to, on a personal level, give myself the kind of internal gut anger that we need to be doing this work all the time to try to change the priorities of this country. I thought that watching a boom in the air in which you thought, oh, that's several $100 million just going poof. And when you really wanted to see the thing not working, so you really wanted the money to be, quote, wasted, that's the kind of level of dysfunction, to put it in a nice way, of this society in general. And I think it's that it's important for us to be witnesses to that, so that when we go home and speak to our communities, when we're out there trying to convince people that something is wrong with the U.S. body politic, that we can give examples like the example of the missile testing at Vandenberg. What is the biggest threat on Earth right now? It's the extreme inequality that exists. And to address that inequality, you have to have a radical change in the way resources are spent. So here we have a U.S. budget that puts over $300 billion into the Pentagon, that wants to add to that this cockamamie Star Wars recreation that would throw another $60 to $200 billion away. And you think, what could that money be used for? Well, I can tell you a lot of things that money could be used for. On the global level, there's 1.2 billion people in this world who don't have access to clean drinking water. Those people could use that missile defense money, and we could provide water and sanitation to every person living on Earth. We now have an AIDS epidemic that is wiping out millions of people in the entire continent of Africa. We could put that money into providing AIDS treatment for people and save millions of lives. We know that in this country, 1 out of every 7 children in this country has no access to health care. 1 out of every 6 children in this country is growing up in poverty. 40 million Americans don't have access to health care. With that one missile defense system, we could provide health care for every single person in the United States. And it goes on and on. Our schools are crumbling here in the United States. They're overcrowded. We don't pay teachers enough. We could put that money into our school system. If we want to think of threats outside, put the money into primary education around the world. With that one missile defense system, we could provide primary education for every child on this planet. And that would be something that we could do that would not only be a benefit to those millions of children, but also radically reduce the threat of any kind of war in this globe. I think it's a real problem in this country that people don't see the direct connection between the billions of dollars we are wasting on the Pentagon, on missile defense systems, making the world less safe, and money not available for human needs and addressing the pressing needs of the environment. And so it makes it very hard to get people riled up to say, you know, my kid's school is falling apart, and that's because of the money we're spending on Pentagon. We have to make those direct connections. And I think that's been hard to do in the past. And that's why we don't have the kind of mass movement we need. I feel sometimes I just want to, shake people up and say, look, it's the military, stupid. That's where all the money is going. And we need direct action, but we also need a mass movement, because I think the direct action so far has been relatively small numbers of relatively white privileged people. And that if we want to turn this into a movement to really redirect where our budget money is spent, we've got to get people involved who are suffering from the fact that we're not spending money in the inner cities, and we're not spending money on anti-poverty programs. So while I am a firm believer in direct action, because it gets media attention, because it's the right thing to do, because we have to use any tool in our toolkit that we have to fight this evil, we also have to put a lot more energy into building this into a more diverse mass movement. I think we're dealing with the same thing in the community that's been fighting the economic rule makers of the World Bank and the IMF and the World Trade Organization, that ironically, while these institutions mostly affect communities of color, it has been a mostly white movement. And within that movement, we're now trying to really make the links and make them as simply as we can to show that there is a direct connection between the manufacturing sector in this country moving overseas to take advantage of cheap slave-like labor and the only jobs being available for young people being in the service sector that pay the lowest wages. So I think in this movement against the missile defense system and the vast amounts of money we spent on the military, we have to make the same kind of 1+1 connections. When I go speaking to communities in poor communities around the state, I always talk about how the budget money is spent. And I say on the national level, ask anybody, do we spend more on education, healthcare, or the military? And you'd be surprised, people don't know. They really don't know. They think because they see a school down the block and their kids go to a school that we're spending a lot of money on schools. And when we talk about out of the federal budget, the discretionary money that we're spending, over 50 cents of every dollar on the military, and only 6 cents on healthcare, and only 8 cents on education, people are what? But it's because people have really been kept in the dark about how much we are spending on military versus on basic needs. These companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, they give millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions every year. And what they get in return for that investment is more and more defense spending. I went to the Republican convention and to George Bush's inauguration. I was amazed when I walked into his inaugural ball to see these huge signs. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, they're right there as soon as you walk in. And all these little trinkets that they're giving away. In fact, I got a little gold-plated F-16 button, and I got a Lockheed Martin calendar, and I got a Raytheon wallet and tote bag. This is our tax money. I see this stuff and I want to pull my hair out, because I say, here they are at George Bush's inauguration with their beautiful signs and their nice little booths where you can get these things for free, all these little trinkets that they're giving out. And you say, where is that money coming from? That's coming from our schools. That's coming from our crumbling infrastructure in this country. That's my tax dollars that I see right there in that gold-plated F-16 that you want to give me. And unfortunately, the other people at the ball didn't see it like that, and they thought it was very nice that these companies were giving away these little gift baskets. But I say that you've just got to scratch the surface and you see the intimate connections that exist between our politicians and these defense contractors, and the number of lobbyists that the defense industry has, so that they can not only get programs like Star Wars that don't work, that we don't need, that make us less safe, but can also get crazy programs like spending $1 billion in Colombia to make life even more miserable for the people there. So you see the tremendous power that these corporate lobbyists have in terms of sucking the money from us, the taxpayers, into their pockets. I think it's very scary what's going on now. Whether we look at George Bush just saying no to the Kyoto Accords, and the rest of the world coming out and saying, excuse me, you just can't be so cavalier about the international community, or whether it's this missile defense system, which is the exact same thing, saying, oh yeah, we had a ABM treaty, but you know what, we're really not going to abide by that. Yeah, we have all these treaties that we have to not just only get the Russians to reduce their nuclear stockpiles, but also the negotiations we've been having with the Chinese. This is really going to piss them off, and we know that, but you know what? We're the only superpower in town right now. When you look at the missile defense system and you see the Russians are mad as hell, you see the Chinese saying, I guess this means that you want us to beef up our defense system because this is obviously aimed at us. You see India and Pakistan saying, why should we stop our nuclear programs when the U.S. just builds up and up and up and is not interested in de-escalating, but is only interested in power through strength? Well, we need that as well. The U.S. by no means has to be spending what it is spending on defense. There are many military analysts who have spent years and years with the Pentagon, with the CIA, and have come out and said we could have a leaner, more effective military if we cut the budget significantly. And we should be having a debate now on what is the level of cuts. During the whole presidential campaign between Bush and Gore, there was no talk about that. Never did you hear them say, well, it looks like we're spending a little bit too much on the Pentagon, and I say we could cut it by 20%. No, I really think we could save a lot more money and put it into things that we really need here in the United States, and we could cut it by $100 billion. No, you heard how much one was going to increase the military, because it's this macho kind of thing, you know, who's got bigger you-know-whats than the other one. And I think, what we really need is a discussion as by how much could we be cutting the military and still have a strong, effective defense. And that debate would say, could we cut it by 15%? Could we cut it by 20%? Or should we be cutting it by 50%? That's the kind of debate we have to be having right now, and we're not having it all. When you look at what we are still spending 12 years after the end of the Cold War, we continue to spend more than the next 12 militaries combined. We continue to outspend 3 to 1 any of the countries that we could even slightly consider our enemies, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, Iraq, Cuba, North Korea, Libya. Put them all together and we outspend them 3 to 1. So we certainly need to have massive cuts in the military. And that's not only important to have money for the things that we need at home or could be using to improve people's lives around the world, but it's also important because of the signal that it sends to the rest of the world, is it's that we're going to start cutting for real, and we want you to do the same. This is the hardest industry to fight against. I look at the campaigns that have been done around this industry. I see groups like Businesses for Sensible Priorities, started by Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's. Now, they had money and put a lot of money into building up a cadre of over 500 CEOs saying, time to cut the military money that we're spending on defense. They got staff people, they got a bus, they traveled around the United States, they got great press, they had wonderful gimmicks. They haven't managed to cut the US military budget at all. You see campaigns like the group that was doing the campaign around the landmines and said, okay, now we got the landmines treaty, we won a Nobel Peace Prize, we're on a roll. Let's now move to the next level. Which corporations and which weapons can we go after now? And have had a very hard time moving on to the next one. This is the hardest nut to crack, I would say. And all that means to me is that we have to work harder, that we have to get more people involved, and we have to think of new and creative tactics. But it is with the recognition that what is holding up this entire global corporate sphere that the U.S. is dominating, and that allows U.S. corporations to go around the world and pillage communities from the Niger Delta to Irian Jaya in Indonesia, and employ 15 and 16-year-old girls around the world to make everything from our sweatshirts to the electronic components in our television sets, is this military complex. That's the crux of it. And so to unravel this, we're dealing with the easier parts when we deal with the corporations who have the sweatshops and are ruining the environments of communities around the world. But to get to what is underpinning that, to get to the military-industrial complex, that's the hardest one of all. If our voices are loud enough, I think we can actually be successful in cutting this program. Successful means building much more of a base in the United States, getting not only communities of color, but getting white middle-class communities to say, hey, what's happening? We talk about military spending. I think we can also do a better job in making these international connections, maybe doing the kind of massive protests that we have had around things like the World Trade Organization, but doing them with a concentrated, unified target and having international demonstrations on those unified targets. This is hidden from the American people. There's not enough discussion about it. And what we need to do is just get lots and lots of people talking about it. And the only way to do that in this society is get the press involved. So I think that we need to do actions that draw the press. We need to create controversy, because controversy is the only way to get the discussion out there. I think all of this is positive for us in our movement right now. I feel sick at the whole U.S. government's idea of militarizing space. I feel sick at the U.S. government's arrogance. I feel sickened by the U.S. government's promotion of violence around the world. And I feel that it really is my duty as a U.S. citizen to do something to stop the militarization of space, to stop the drain of our tax dollars into something that is not just useless, it's extremely dangerous. The U.S. intentions to conduct war in space is related to the U.S. intentions to be able to conduct two simultaneous ground wars, is related to the U.S. intention to be able to dominate the world militarily in any way. It's kind of like Malcolm X saying, by any means necessary. So I think when we look at the U.S. arrogance, the U.S. domination, the U.S. calling other states rogue states, and then proceeding to escalate the arms race to a new level and to be planning the militarization in space and to make the rest of the world so fearful that they have to take their precious tax dollars and start throwing it back into their militaries, we are going on the road of annihilation. And we have to find ways to roll this back. And certainly if we allow the missile defense system to go forward, and we allow this program of domination of the U.S. of space, I think we are going to be plagued in the future by our inaction. This is the time for us to really have some sense of the demonic vision that the people running this country have. They have a long-term vision, and that their long-term vision is a threat to every single one of us living on this earth. That we have to do more and more to stop them, and more to turn our country from being a rogue state into a country that can do things to really change life on this planet for the better. So either we let the U.S. go the road of building missile defense system, of militarizing space, forcing the rest of the world to put more and more of their money into the arms race, or we turn the whole thing around. I have tremendous faith in people power. I've seen it used around the world to overthrow dictatorship of Suharto in Indonesia, to get rid of Marcos in the Philippines. I've seen it used to get rid of the most racist, highly militarized South African apartheid regime, and see Nelson Mandela walking out of jail. I've seen people power do amazing things. I've seen in my short lifetime people power in the United States doing amazing things. I'm old enough to have been at the tail end of the heart of the civil rights movement and the war against Vietnam. I've seen us shut down the World Trade Organization in Seattle. And I've been on the streets with thousands and thousands of people yelling out, "Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop." And your heart just expands and you get this sense of strength. People's movement is a real thing. And we are, for the first time in history, organizing a global people's movement. We have connections around the world like we've never had before. We have tools like the internet that allow us to make those connections that we've never had before. We have the ability to reach out across the world in a matter of minutes. So I have tremendous faith in this kind of global movement that we're building. I feel really privileged to be part of that movement. I can't wait to get up every morning and get out and get to work because I'm excited about building the movement. I see my own kids being raised in this kind of family that gives you a sense of empowerment. And my own daughters, one is 20 and one is 10, and they're both part of the movement. So I feel the power personally, and I feel it when I'm out on the streets with people showing our power. And I think that the only thing that we have to do is keep on building. But I really do believe that there ain't no power like the power of the people. When the people get organized, when the people get mobilized, when we keep our eyes on the prize, when we don't fight internally, when we recognize that we need these broad alliances, that we might not all think the same on all of the issues, but we've got enough in common to be allies. I think it's a beautiful movement that we're building. And I think it will, in years to come, be able to make tremendous changes in the way this world's priorities are organized.